Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an amazing show tonight. This is another Living Theosophy special. This is a very, very special. I want to remind you, you're free to talk in the chat. It is a premiere, so I will be there with you live in the chat. And tonight's very special guest is Compassion Incarnate itself. Now, that's how I describe him. It is the one and only Peter Panagore. Reverend Peter Baldwin Panagore is an entrepreneur and an ordained pastor. He's got a healthy background in national American radio and television, but is known all over the world. He's a storyteller, a communicator, a public speaker, a pastor, and he's graduated from Yale University, where he completed a Master of Divinity, that's the study of theology, with a focus on the practices and writings of the classics of Western mysticism, which we're going to talk about tonight. He also has had some very important firsthand experience. We're going to talk about that, touch on that tonight. Peter has had two near-death experiences, one in 1980 and a second one in 2015. Peter has chronicled his extraordinary journey in the global bestseller, which is called Heaven is Beautiful: How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning. And he has also written 2 Minutes for God, Quick Fixes for the Spirit for Simon and Schuster. And he's currently working on a project, his third book, with a working title, which is Knowing God: Varieties of Mystical Experiences, which we will definitely cover tonight. Peter speaks, talks, gives interviews, and teaches all over the world, in person, live streaming, YouTube like he's here with us, TV, FM, and AM radio. And you can see Peter on Amazon. It's currently streaming. It's Life to Afterlife Near-Death Experience. That's Amazon Prime for Prime members. And this is just a fraction of all that Peter does, just a tiny little minuscule bit of it. He is a busy man, and he has tons of projects and accomplishments. He's very busy. He's dedicated in the name of selflessly serving humanity. Peter is joining us from Boothbay Harbor, Maine, where he lives with his beautiful wife, his nearby grown children, and his granddaughter. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only, the remarkable Peter Panagore. Thank you so much for being here. Yay!
Wow. You
Well,
left me speechless.
It's all true, and I actually had to edit out pages of amazing accomplishments. Thank you for being with us tonight, Peter. I am so grateful and so excited, and also so inspired at what you're doing. I was talking to him right before we went live, and I said to him about how he has this comforting vibe. He has a very loving, he exudes a very loving presence. And I hope that you're able to take that away from the hour that we have together with Peter. Peter, how are you doing this afternoon? Am I interrupting anything? Are you writing this afternoon?
I was writing, and I'll be writing again, working on the book proposal under the guidance of my agent.
Oh, okay, good. So this is the third one, and this is again talking about mysticism as a common experience. So we're going to talk about not just mysticism for other people or historical mysticism, but your very own personal mystic experiences. Yes.
Yes.
People don't talk about that much because they don't want to be shunned. And
Cuckoo.
yeah, do you get that when you?
Oh, that's why I kept my mouth shut for all these years, for decades, because that's the way people see it.
Did you have these when you were younger? Did they come in when you were really?
Very little. I started out when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I didn't choose this. I want to make sure you understand. It wasn't something I decided to do. This is something that seemed to come with the package. It happened to me, and then it continued to happen to me. And then after I died, it intensified, and I went in pursuit of it. And
so when you were, this is obviously pre-near-death experience. This is when you're just being a little guy running around, being a kid, and these things come in, and we might as well, let's start there if we can, if you feel comfortable enough. Did you share when these took place? Did you share with your parents? Did you share with siblings or friends?
I told my mom about the first one, which I'll tell you.
Okay.
And then I learned to keep my mouth shut, and I kept my mouth shut until I came out with my near-death experience. And I told you before the show, the reason why I came out with my near-death experience, my first one, before I talked about mysticism, is because mysticism is so taboo. And it was, the churches threw out mysticism, and science threw out mysticism, and society denigrates it. And so, I decided to come out as a near-death experiencer first, because it was safer.
Yeah.
That was my thinking. If I can come out with this, then maybe I can come out with this after, and that's where I'm at now.
And how would you describe, for those watching, a mystical experience? I know what my take on it would be, but those of you watching, thinking you've heard the term mystic, a mystical experience, and mysticism, how would you describe it, Peter?
I go to William James and the varieties of religious experience. William James is maybe one of the most, well, he's definitely one of the most brilliant men of the 20th century, might have been the most. But in his varieties of religious experience, he defines mysticism with four characteristics. One, and these are my words for his words, it's transient. So mystical experiences, they have a beginning and an end. They start and they finish. They're passive. You don't make them happen. They happen to you. They are done to you.
Yes.
And three, they're noetic, knowledge. Noetic is this word that means it's knowledge that's implanted in your soul. It's wisdom. That's the old word for it, wisdom. But it's implanted in your soul and it's unreachable by your mind. So your brain can't quite grasp it. Therefore, number four, it's ineffable. You can't say it. And when you do say it, it sounds like either a Hallmark card. I don't know if you have Hallmark cards over there in the UK, but it sounds trite, or, and I want to say I love Hallmark. I had I had an opportunity to be on the Hallmark channel in my younger years, so I'm a big fan. But it sounds trite. But the experience of it is so direct. The communication is so, well, it's infilling, it's a download, it's non-linguistic, it's telepathic, but it's so fulfilling you can never say it. And that thing that's so fulfilling lodges inside the consciousness, lodges inside the soul, and stays there permanently, because the first access point for it is not your body. It is your soul, is your consciousness, and then it sort of filters up to your body. And so it's always just beyond reach, but it can be always present if you think on it. If you set your mind to it, you can bring back some of that experience, and it can become an opening and a window into heaven for you, inside you, as part of the gift.
Did you say into heaven? Is that what you said?
That's what I said.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Would you say it's are you remembering? Would it be remembering, or is it coming in as an addition to this lifetime? Is it something that's being interjected into the life, or is it the remembering of the soul? Is it somehow a connection? How would you describe it?
I would say it feels like a knowing on this side, but actually it's a remembering.
Okay.
It's because the consciousness can't grasp it, and so it's so ineffable. It's hard for the consciousness to grasp it, and it feels like a knowing. That's the way I experience it here. But I know it's a remembering because I've been to the other side, and I know what it's like to remember. And I know that that everything that I know about the divine is what I knew on the other side. It, much reduced, a tenth of a tenth of a tenth. When I was on the other side, I remembered who I was and what I was and what I was made of. And I haven't forgotten that I know.
And you brought that back with you. You brought that back with you.
I did. I got supercharged by it. I was on this path, as I said, starting as a very little kid.
Yes.
But it got supercharged. And it seemed to me that the four of the five mystical experiences that I had, no, there were four, and then there was one shortly after. The four mystical experiences that I had before I died, they seemed to set me up for it. And I didn't know that until hindsight. And some of it I didn't know until years later. I didn't quite figure out what the message was until I was really began to look at it. And these are things, mystical experiences, if you use them as a tool in your spiritual life, they continue to give more and more. So if you get it, so let me give an example. And this I think is the most common type of mystical experience there is. This is just anecdotal, but I spent 18 months touring around New England, which is, I live in the Northeast USA, and I preaching in little churches all over New England, all sorts of different denominations. And they invited me because of I'm a near-death experiencer. So
Mhm.
they knew what they were getting. But
Mhm.
I would ask the entire congregation, who here has ever died, has ever, I'm sorry, who here has ever been visited by a deceased loved one?
Mm. Mhm.
Raise your hand. 50% of every congregation,
Wow.
50% raised their hand.
Wow.
And that's a lot. And but they'd only raise their hand after I raised my hand.
Right, right.
And you know, they're all like not wanting to raise their hand because they're all
Yeah.
looking around at everybody else who's raising their
Yeah.
hand. And pretty soon everybody's got their hand up. 50% of the people who's told somebody, everybody told somebody they can
Mhm.
trust. Who's ever talked about it in public or at a cocktail party or in church? Nobody. Nobody talks about it.
Wow.
And yet they go through this shift where they may have believed in the afterlife or they may not have. But when the dead person comes to them and blasts them with love that's radiant inside them, they shift from believing in the afterlife to
Mhm.
knowing
Yes.
this one dead loved person is still living. And that's a very huge gift. And so their grief shifts from, because this often happens often around the time of death, and their grief shifts to a little bit of hope. They're still broken, like trauma. It's
Yeah.
real. When you
Yeah.
lose somebody, it's real. But it shifts into hope of future relationship and love unending. And then every time, and here's where I was going with this, every time they feel the overwhelming grief, they can look back inside themselves and grab the memory of that experience, and they can reinvigorate their love, their
Mm.
their hope. And
Yeah.
so, and that can be over time, that can wedge open and wedge open and wedge open and wedge open and wedge open. It can get wider and wider and wider and wider and wider. And it's a gift. So there's really two gifts with every mystical experience, at least. There's the knowing that you get
Yes.
directly, and
Yes.
then there's the opportunity to use that gift, that experience, as a window into heaven for yourself, to find your way back into that place. And I do this. This is part of my practice. I do that, and it works for me.
Well, what you're doing is helping quite a few people. This is a very big thing. Death is massive, and a lot of times we hide it and act like it's not going to happen. And then when it does happen, because it's as natural as birth, then there's this huge heartache and an ending. But when you understand, like you said, the we that is we continues to be, it isn't the end. And then when they get a chance to, even though they are not with the physical body anymore, and they have to grieve the loss of that person in their life, that there's more to our story. And that is so comforting. And that you say they can tap into that and know that. But it's interesting that you say many people didn't want to raise their hands because it's ridicule. They don't want to be made fun of by society. But near death experiences up until what, the 60s and 70s, people are like, oh, crazy. And even, the ones of today, the scientists who don't want to believe in any airy fairy stuff are like, that's not true, but it is true. You have experienced it. And once you have that experience, that is proof for you and those who have had it. And that's one of the things we do on this channel is you don't have to have a near-death experience to access these teachings. They're available out there. So
Mhm.
you don't have to. I think a lot of people look at near-death experiences, oh, they're the chosen ones. They got to have that. I don't get to, but that's not true. You can. Is that not true? Yeah.
You can have up to there's lots of different varieties that of grace that you can receive, that can
Yeah.
be given to you. And I want to say that some of the science is changing now. Dr. Bruce Grayson, one of the lead near-death experiencer scientists, researchers in the United States, just came out with a new book,
Mm.
and with the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And so there has been an accumulation of evidence over the last 40 years that is now becoming public as like this week,
Oh.
basically, right? That is in a consumable fashion, and the book is called After by Dr. Bruce Grayson. I'm reading it right now. I've listened to it. I've attended a bunch of his lectures. He was a rigorous skeptic,
Mm.
as you need to be in science.
Yeah.
And so it's important. And then there's this doctor named Sam Parnia, who's a Brit and also works in the United States, and he came out with the Aware Study 2 last year or the year before, and his conclusion is scientific conclusion. Okay, this is not speculation. This is what the evidence shows, that consciousness survives death for a period of time, which sounds like a small thing for
Mm.
a period of time, but that's humongous
Yeah.
in a scientific community that thinks that consciousness is biologically generated.
Yes, yes. That's a very big thing. And also, it seems to be in this, I don't know, world of 2021, we see science catching up with spirituality or religion or what do you want to call it, anything, the supernatural, which is natural. But anyway, it's catching up. We're starting to see, they're seeing each other in each other, science. And it's divine science, really. And as we get further into science, we're going to see more of this spirituality, for lack of a better word, but it's beyond. It's actually all that we are. We are spirit and matter. And this is such a beautiful thing that you're doing, is bringing this out and giving this, I don't know, gravitas, and actually not being afraid to talk about it and having those folks raise their hands. Because how many people are sitting around right now saying, oh, I can't say that that happened because they think I'm crazy, if da 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 da. Say it, talk to your friends, speak it, because I think you can learn from it. As Peter was saying, this information that you're remembering, you're accessing with your, what you mentioned, your intellectual mind can't really grasp it in the way that we think right now in the cerebral study, but you can grasp it. It's given to you. It's here inside your heart and your soul, and you can bring it up to apply in this life, possibly to have a better life, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It won't cure your ills, but it will always make your life better.
And to help you navigate, maybe. I mean, this
Yeah,
is a tough world. This is a place of great suffering. And I wanted to talk about your first experience, if you can, because I think this is
sure.
really valuable. Again, the book that he's working on, I want to give this a plug. This is going to be coming out. When is this due for publication, Peter?
Sometime next year, I think.
Okay, so he's working on it right now. This is the third book, and it's called Knowing God. And this is the varieties of mystical experiences. And he's talked about a little bit about mysticism or mystical means. And you don't have to be anybody special to have a mystical experience. Just being a human being qualifies you to have a mystical experience. So if you could, the very first one that you remember, when you say you told your mom, then you didn't speak about it, what happened then? What was that?
Well, my younger brother had just been born. He's 5 years younger than me. So
Yeah.
he showed up in the house, and I put my nose out of joint a little bit because I was the baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
You're
and
still. Yeah.
so and my sisters were off to school this day, and I was in morning kindergarten, and so I came home from kindergarten class, and it was a springtime day, and I came in the house and I had lunch, and my brother went to bed, and which meant I had to get out of the house because I was a noisy little boy.
Oh,
And so my mother was ironing in the kitchen, and she sent me outside to play, and I said, okay, but I need to be able to climb my tree. And
oh.
my mom said, "Okay, you can climb your tree. I'll watch from the window." So there's this small maple tree in the front yard, my tree, and I can climb up to the lower branch. And so I climb up to the lower branch, and I scoot up to the one up just above it, and I wave to my mom, and off she goes. But it's springtime, and the leaves, sugar maple trees, are two-tone leaves, and so
Hmm.
all the leaves are very fresh, and they're two-tone color, very spring, beautiful colors. And there was a breeze, and I was sitting in the crook of the tree, and all the leaves were flipping with the breeze, two-tone, flip, 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 rustle, rustle, rustle. So I was getting this sort of hypnotic experience, you could say.
Mhm.
And as I sat there watching the leaves flip, suddenly I heard uh, a roaring, well, a roaring noise behind me that entered in, like inside the tree, that was also entered inside me. And when this happened, I immediately was taken by this entity, and pulled like an elastic band right up to heaven. And I could hear the roaring outside me. I could hear the roaring inside me. I could see myself in my body. I could see my soul sort of stretched through, or maybe I had traveled up the silver cord, you could say,
Hmm.
and between the worlds, and I was in the presence of the divine, and in the presence of the divine, this entity was still with me. And the whole voice, there was this, it was a smallish space inside a much larger space, and I was in the presence of, I I want to say, like a being there was like a being there, and the being spoke to me, and this being was illuminated. It was powerful. It knew me. I was completely unafraid. So I'm a 5-year-old boy,
Mhm.
and I am in the presence of the divine, in a state of adoration, and the voice says to me, "You belong to me.
Mm.
You are mine. You will work for me." And all of this is non-linguistic. So I
Mhm.
put it into language, but it was a matter of being. And it wasn't an ownership like a slavery ownership. It was an ownership like you're my beloved child. You are the one I'm you will work for me. You'll work in the family business. And so and so in the next second, I agree. I'm like, obviously,
Yeah.
it was self-evident, and it was all this love. And the next thing I knew, I was back in my body again, and I had this distinct radiance inside of me. And so the first thing I did was I got to tell my mom. So I climbed down out of the tree and I run across the yard and I go in the house and I slam the door behind me
Oh
because
no.
I'm excited, because I'm a kid.
Yeah.
And a screen door, boom, and I go into the kitchen, and the first thing my mom's like, she hears the noise, the iron stops, and I hear the
Yeah.
baby, what? And then the baby
Oh.
quiets down, and I got scolded, and I told my mom. She made me sit down till the baby stopped crying, and the baby stopped crying, and I told my mom that God had spoken to me, and I decided on the way back into the house that I was going to be a priest, because a priest was the only thing I knew. I was raised Roman Catholic and Greek
Mhm.
Orthodox. They both had priests, and priest was the only thing I knew. I was like, God's gotten me to be a priest. I'm going to be God's priest. I'm going to
At
work for
5
God.
years old. That's so
And
awesome.
so my mom was upset, and this is how I learned not to tell anybody. My mom was upset that I had woken the baby and disobeyed and slammed the door,
Yeah.
and so she's got to do the mom thing. And as a parent, I know what this is like. You got to do the thing. And so she said, um, since you're going to, and this is 1964 or 5. And so I say that for context because my mom said to me, since you're going to be a priest and you're not going to have a wife to do your ironing for you,
Uh-huh. Oh
right?
no. Yeah.
Right. I am going to teach you to do your ironing, and sew, and dust. And
Uh,
you're going to begin today by dusting the dining room. And here's the spray can, and here's the dust thing. And when you're done working, you can go back outside. So I was suddenly put in this position of, I told this thing out, and
yeah.
I got punished for it. And not only that, I had to learn to do women's work,
Yeah.
right?
I
So, but I
understand.
want to say that on the upside of that, I am the one who cleans the house. I can wield a mean needle. I actually worked in reupholstery for a while,
Really?
and
That's a very big
I
deal.
did, and I am good at ironing. And
Wow.
so all those things came in handy. Um, but I learned, I had an emotional reaction, and my emotional reaction was, when you tell your mother these sorts of things, you get punished. And
Mm.
so when the second thing happened in the next year, and Ganesh came and visited me,
Oh my goodness.
I realized that it was smart for me not to tell anybody. How could I tell anybody that
Wow.
there had been an elephant in the house? I mean, nobody would
Oh my gosh. I love that
nobody
so
would
much.
believe me. So I kept my mouth shut about that.
Tell
But
me what happened when he came. What happened? It was the next year you were 6, 5,
I
7?
was 5 or 6, and
Yeah.
I my brother had moved into my room. My
Ah,
brother had
the little
moved into
one.
my room.
Oh no, I know. Oh
Right?
God. So it's a boy's
My
room now.
I love my brother. We get along really great. But he had moved into the room, and I wasn't very happy about it.
Yeah.
But I remember lying on my bed and hearing my name called. The door was open 6 inches. The baby was asleep, and the hall light was off because it was late. But I could hear my name being called. Peter, Peter, come to me. Peter, Peter, come to me. And I thought, I woke up. I know this voice. I know this sweet voice. I know this voice. But I couldn't think of who it would be. But
Mm.
I knew it, and I could hear compassion in the voice. And so I sat up and I swung my legs over to the side of the bed. And as I looked toward the door, my eye caught that I was still in bed. So my body was still in bed,
Oh,
curled
see?
up,
Yes.
and I could see myself. And I like, what's this? And then I noticed that I could see in the room, even though all the lights were off. And it
Mm.
wasn't white light, it was kind of sepia tone. And I could see my brother sleeping. And so I could still hear this voice calling me, calling me, calling me. So I stand up and my feet don't touch the floor.
Oh my
I
gosh.
look down and my feet aren't on the floor, and I look like me. So I look like the boy in the bed, but I still hear this, and so it's so attractive to me. I go to the door and I stop at the door because the door is 6 inches open, and I listen because I'm a little cautious, and I reach for the knob, and my hand goes through the knob, Whoop,
Wow.
and the voice says, "Just walk through the door."
Oh my God. Oh
Walk
my
through the
God.
closed door. So I walk through the closed door, and now I'm in the hallway, and it's a banister, and it's an upstairs, and it's got a right angle set of stairs, and on the landing um, was a baby elephant, and
Baby
a
elephant?
baby elephant, a bigger than me, but a baby elephant, a little elephant,
Was it
and
translucent? Was it
it was dressed in Indian clothing. It was
oh
like
my God.
sparkles and
Oh,
and,
that's
and
so
like draped and all this stuff,
funny.
and and it's looking at me and it's
Yeah.
calling to me, but it's not moving its lips.
Right.
It's
Right.
calling to me from its mind,
Yeah.
and it motions with its trunk to come down the stairs. And
Oh,
so I recognize this being. I don't know who it is
yeah.
because I'd never been exposed to Indian culture.
Right. Not as a
Um,
Catholic. Yeah.
Nope. And so, but I recognize the love inside this being.
Hmm.
And so I go down the stairs, and as I get down the stairs, I stop on the landing, and it's got these huge black eyes, coal black eyes, no pupils, no irises, no whites, just black. And I look into one of the eyes. It said, I think it was like it told me, look into my eyes. I look into
Mm.
its eyes, and I fell into the eye. I just flew into the eye, and I fly into the eye, and I'm inside of compassion. I'm inside of wisdom. I'm inside of knowledge. I see maybe 100 million billion sparkles. It's all sparkly star-like and in great distances, but I'm enveloped in this in wisdom and knowledge.
Mm.
And then I don't know how I got out. I must have had a thought, what is this? Where am I? What's going on? Kind of thing. And I was pulled out and put and set down. And the voice said to me, in this telepathic said, "Now go down the stairs and go outside." And I'm thinking, my parents don't want me to go outside of the house,
Hmm.
at night.
Yeah.
But it says go outside. I want you to go outside. So I go down. I float. My feet don't touch the stairs. I float down the stairs. I pass through the door and the screen door, down the little porch, out the sidewalk, the front walk, into the middle of the road, and it commands me to look up.
Mm.
And so I look up into this beautiful night sky full
Mm.
of stars. And as I look at it, it opens into infinity. And now I look into the depth of infinity, and it's such a shock to me to see. It's so frightening to me that it's too much for me to take in.
Yeah.
And in an instant, I'm back in my bed again. And so I wake up in my bed, I sit up, and I'm like, I'm back in my body again. I look for the boy. I'm the boy. It's sort of dark in the room. The light in the hallway is off, so I creep out to go look for the elephant. I check my sister's room, make sure they were at my parents' room. I listen, and they're not there. The elephant's not on the stairs. I crept through every room in the house downstairs. I turned on all the lights, went into the dank, dark, scary cellar. I was so driven by this.
Hmm.
Well, double locks on the cellar door kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I went down, and I
Wow.
looked in all the closets, and then I hung around up for like an hour waiting to think that this treasure was going to come back to me. And the next day when I got up, I how was I going to tell my parents that?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
last time I talked to my mom about God, I ended up getting punished, and this, I had no words for this, so I just kept it to myself.
Mm. How long was it till you told somebody? Is it now when this book?
Well, pretty recently,
Yeah.
yeah, I kept that for quiet for a very, very, very long time, long after my near-death experience. And yeah, because uh, I began after my NDE, my first one. I began to study mysticism,
Hmm.
and so I became exposed to the varieties of mystical experiences, and realized that these are global things,
Hmm.
and that
Yes.
it's not exclusively Western Christianity, although it is there. It's
Yeah.
not exclusively so by any means, and that the variety of mystical experiences that there are led me to understand that that's what happened to me.
And so this book, is this a compilation of all of your mystical experiences?
It
Um,
is pretty much, and there's been a lot of them, and then some of them have been witnessed by others,
really?
and they have, and some have been, and it's been kind of healing for me. I'm always so pre near death experience. They sort of set me up for what was going to happen to me when I died and after,
Right.
even though I had a choice to come back. It seems in hindsight that because I chose to come back, I was sort of prepped for it.
Okay. So, because a 6-year-old boy feeling an all encompassing compassion, that is a really big thing for you to go through your life after that with feeling that, even knowing in this ever expanding universe, you're able to see that. That's a really big thing for a little guy. And I was wondering, when you were young, did you tap into these experiences and be able to use some of that wisdom and knowledge as you navigate youth and teenagerhood and all that kind of stuff? Did you find that the experiences helped you be a more successful human in this very troubling place?
I'd love to say yes.
You can say yes,
I
but
could
but
say
yeah, yeah,
yes,
but no, yeah, I
but not
understand.
really.
Uh,
What I understood, my 6-year-old brain couldn't comprehend what had happened to me. And I, I know I was a compassionate, sensitive boy. I know
yeah,
that. I know I was helpful and all that kind of stuff, but I was also a boy, and I got in as much trouble as my friends did.
yeah,
But I always had a conscience. My
mm,
conscience was always very strong. Even
mm,
when I did something wrong, which I did, my conscience would be very troublesome to me.
really, the
Yeah.
inner voice there.
Now my conscience was very strong. So even when I did things wrong, I felt extra bad about it compared to what I assume was compared to some of my friends who's like, I don't care what we did to that person.
Really.
Yeah.
the the voice that you mentioned, the consciousness, because a lot of people, when we they yeah, that people say, oh, that's your conscience, that voice inside that says, don't do that, that's not okay, you need to get up and go do whatever, da 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 da. And there's this voice that just kind of hammers at you. How would you describe this voice of the conscience that we all have, even though you had those mystical experiences? For those that are watching, wondering, is it just a secondary voice inside that's making me question, or the voice of the higher self? How would you describe the voice of the conscience for those watching, please?
I don't know why it has to be either one of those two. It can't be both at the same time.
What
And
would,
intuition as well. And that it's and after the fact, it's the bad feeling. It's
mm,
like it's the voice going it's not like a word. It's more like and like you get that vibration of
yeah.
so it's different than the voice that I heard after I died. It's the voice I heard after I died was much stronger, much stronger.
Okay, so that was something you hadn't heard up until the point of death in 1980, correct?
No, I didn't. It was more an intuitive thing. Conscious was an intuitive thing.
Mm.
I don't know. I'm not sure whether you had ever seen the Disney movie that came out in the 60s about conscience with Jiminy Cricket. This is
Kind of, yes, I remember that in the peripheral.
Yes,
Yes, yes.
right. So that was my image for my conscience.
Oh, Jimmy Cricket. Okay.
Jiminy Cricket was my image for my conscience, but I think it was for every kid in America at that
Yeah.
point. So,
Yeah.
so sometimes if I heard Jiminy Cricket, I heard my conscience, and I'm not sure how to separate those two things.
Well, you sound like you have, as you came in, it says, you have work to do. You're on this team. Let's get busy. Did you, before we get to the near death experience, which I just want to touch on, I want to talk about counseling as well. Did you feel that, I don't know, did you feel there was work to do? Did you kind of know what you were going to do with your life because of these experiences? Or did that come in later on after 1980? When you were younger, like thinking, what am I going to do when I grow up? I'm working for the force. I'm working for the force.
Well, I was planning on being an architect.
Oh, an architect. Okay.
An architect because it was the family business and because I was good with the pencil,
Right.
and I worked in construction. But I always had this thing inside me. I haven't come to the conclusion that there's any one way to live out the call.
Right.
You can have the call to the divine to live to work for the boss, and you can do anything you want. You can work for the boss anywhere at all. You don't need to like have a special job. You
Right.
could be a teacher or a scuba diver or a mathematician. Doesn't really matter, um, because it's really about the connection of the soul to the
Mm.
divine. And so there was always that sort of theme inside of me, but I didn't intend to follow through on it because in my world, religion was pretty repressive.
Hmm.
And I didn't like I never was comfortable with the repression of it. I was a pretty serious, church kid.
Yeah.
Um, and I even had a born again experience when I was in college, early college, but it was always mystical. Every single true experience I ever had of the divine was mystical, and it was never theological. It was
Yeah.
never it was
Wow.
never about religion. Not ever once. Still isn't.
Do you feel now being a pastor? There's so many questions I have for you. I'm sorry if I'm all over the map here.
No, it's fine.
Being a pastor, I know that when people do have near death experiences, they go up and they say religion doesn't mean anything. It's just sometimes there's a representative there from the religion to help you cross because it's familiar. But as far as religion, it's not about religion. That divides.
It's
It's
not.
more unity. Can you explain a little bit about that? About your feelings? Because I know you do Not Church now. If people want to find you at Not Church on Sundays on your YouTube channel, which I will link to down below, and also the books as well. Everything we're talking about, there'll be links down below to get back to Peter. How would you describe religion once you cross over? Um, yeah.
I think that all religions. I just read this quote by Tom Robbins from Skinny Legs and All, and I'm gonna slaughter the quote, but it's something like all religions start with mystical experience, and yet mysticism is once it's institutionalized, it dies. It's
Ah,
antithetical to mysticism is antithetical to religion, and that's exactly what happened to me. So when I died and came back, I came back with no belief system at all, like
really?
zero. And it
Yeah.
wasn't just about religion. I didn't believe in anything. I didn't understand food or air breathing or cultures or histories. I didn't have any. I didn't have any. I couldn't grapple onto any of those. There was no way for me to to get a footing on any of those things anymore. They were all Maya to me, all illusions to me, all of it, especially human constructed belief systems,
Yeah.
especially those.
Human constructed belief systems based on our best understanding of our lower self and our ego, or whatever you want to call it. There's lots of names for it. Would you say, you just mentioned something in what you'd said, illusion? When you talk about Maya and you talk about this illusion, when you come back from what you feel is, I guess, reality, which is after death, is that a true statement? Would you say that after death is more real than here on planet Earth?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
capital R over there, little tiny r here in very small font.
Love it. I
Um,
love it.
it's
Um,
not.
when you say illusion, you say coming back to the illusion. A lot of the ancient wisdoms try to describe this illusion, and people go, "Well, I can feel this. I can feel this. This isn't an illusion, but it is an illusion." But I'd love to hear your description of it to help us understand how the physical world of the five senses is an illusion, please.
Well, my problem when I came back is that I had to believe in glasses.
Yeah.
I had I had to like understand that I had to consume water to make this biological machine run. I,
Yeah.
I can't show you the reality on the other side. You have to see it for yourself. That's just the way spirituality works.
And,
Um, but I can put it this way, that from the moment of my return, I have no fear of death. And I would say that again and again to people. Can't wait to go home. Once I came out of the closet, the NDE closet, um, I'd say that so much so that my kids got upset.
yeah. Yeah.
um, but it turns out when I died the second time, I was right. I wasn't afraid at all. I knew where I was going because I was going back to the reality that is. I can't show you. I can't show anybody the
Mm,
illusion that's here because there's this thing in the way. It's the veil. It's the ignorance.
mm,
That it's not our fault that we're inside of this matrix, and it's very difficult to see through it. So I've never considered it my job to convince anybody of anything. That's not what I'm
right.
here for. Um, I chose to go into religion to swing around back. I chose to go into religion as a job because I didn't know where else to go to find anybody else like me.
Yeah.
And so I went to divinity school to study mysticism. I found my peer group is old dead people, men and women from around the world who had dusty books
Yeah.
that nobody else was reading,
Yeah.
and yet I found my peer group among them. And then the dean of admission, to whom I spoke last week.
Did you?
She's like 93. Where she changed my life. So
Oh,
she let me do an independent study for 3 years. And I didn't tell her what I was doing. I mean, she knew I was studying mysticism. She didn't know why I was doing it
oh, I see.
because I kept that a secret. And so at the end of those years, she convinced me to go into the church, and I thought a lot about it because I live a life of service. I've lived a life of service,
Mhm.
and I knew that in one of the American denominations, one of the liberal American progressive denominations, of which she was a member, I could maybe do some good. I could help people in real sort of social work, brick and mortar sort of ways. But I also thought I could do some other things. I could practice prayer and yoga in public, and nobody would trouble me about it.
That's
It
right,
would be
because it
part
was
of
your
my
job.
job.
Yeah.
So I could live a contemplative life in
Oh.
public view and
Mhm.
nobody would know.
Mm.
I could study. So I continued my studies because pastors have to study. You got to write every week. So I got to read a lot of books, which I did, about the subject I'm interested in,
Yeah.
and try to worm that into what I had to talk about. But also to practice writing,
Mm.
because every week you have a deadline, and you got to speak. And so
Very determined, yeah.
I figured I could eventually write a book about this story, but in the meanwhile, I could do the more important thing. And the more important thing is not head knowledge. Head knowledge was giving me tools through which to think about it, articulate it, expand my understanding of it, but really to practice the interior journey, because it's that's the only way you get to the knowledge. You don't need any education at all. You
Mhm.
don't need to go to college, even go to high school. You don't need to know how to read. All you need to do is know how to go inside yourself and get out of the way. And
Ah,
that's what mystics do all over the world forever. And so I chose the interior. I chose the interior route in the public eye, and nobody knew what I was up to. Nobody was the wiser.
ah,
Um, I was
brilliant.
sort of a spy inside of the church. And so,
Was it
yeah,
Catholic
I am.
Catholic church you went back into?
It
No?
was no, no. I liked sex, and you can't be
Oh, I see
legally.
what you mean. Oh,
You
yeah.
gotta, you're not supposed to have sex when you're a priest.
Some of them do.
Some of them do, and that's fine. I got no problem with that. But the hierarchy, they don't like it so much.
Yeah.
So I went into an American. It's called United Church of Christ,
Oh, okay.
but it's congregational, and
Mhm.
they're the descendants of the Puritans and the Pilgrims. Like, but they've kind of wised up in the intervening
Good.
centuries. They're
Yes,
not,
good. Yes. A little bit
they're
uptight.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're a little. Well, there's the Congregationalists in New England still call themselves the Frozen Chosen. They're still sort of, very rigid. They're
Yeah.
wonderful people. I love these people. But it was always a bad fit for me, because I couldn't be truthful with them, because
Mm.
every time I preached, I had to say that I believed, and I am not a believer.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm just not a believer. I know that God is real,
Yes.
and I know that I'm known by the divine, and I've oriented my entire life. My stability in the world is based on my reorientation of my interior, like latching on to the holy. As many lines as I can throw up to the holy, the more stability I have in the world here. Otherwise, I'm lost.
I
I'm just
understand.
unmoored.
So how long did you do that for? If you had to kind of, it wasn't all about the theology. You did your thing because it was close enough, but how long did you do that for until you started doing what you're doing now?
Well, I did. I was a pulpit community minister for 18 years,
Mm,
and I ran it. I ran it for everybody. I did a lot of. You're supposed to run it just for the church members. I
mm,
never did that.
good.
I
Right.
never. They all thought that I worked for them. But I never did. I never worked for them.
I
I
understand.
only worked for God. And so that I did a lot of social work. I did a lot. I worked in domestic violence. I worked with the police department. I
Mhm.
worked with the poor and soup kitchens and homeless shelters, and I did all this stuff as like a community ombudsman. That's what I figured I was. I did that for 18 years, at the end of which, during the last 11 years of my ministry, I was at a church, a very nice church, except for there was an embezzler in the church that poisoned the congregation. And by the end of that, I was a broken person. They tried the leadership was protecting this person, and they tried to ruin me personally and financially and
Oh,
professionally and publicly. It was bad.
wow.
And
Oh
and
my God.
eventually we caught her. We're good now, she and I.
Good.
But she served some time.
Oof.
And after this, so this one Sunday, after all this was over, and these people really tried to ruin me. Like these are powerful people. I live in a resort town, and the people who live in my town are regular folks, but there's a lot of super high end executives here who've retired. I live in a very beautiful place, and there's a lot of beautiful homes here,
Yeah,
and
sounds
members of the
beautiful.
church, and so they're used to wielding their power, and they tried to ruin me, but they failed, and we won.
Good.
And
Yes.
in the end, somebody said to me one Sunday morning, one of the deacons came up to me before preaching. He said, on behalf of the deacons, we want to apologize to you for the way we treated you for the last 7 years, which was brutal.
Wow. That's a
It was
really big deal.
it,
Good.
it was it made New England news.
Wow.
It was in the front page of the Portland of the it was big news, and because of the amount of money that was stolen and all the things that happened. But at the end of it, and he said to me, "You must have had a lot of faith
Uh-huh.
to put up with us." And I thought, today's the day. I'm telling them, because now we're like, now I trust them
Yeah.
that they love me.
Yeah.
And so that was the day I came out of the closet to them, and I told them I don't have any belief at all.
Oh my God.
I am not a believer. I do not believe in the Bible. That's a really hard statement for a
That's
lot of people to
brave.
hear.
Brave. Good for
Because
you. Good for you.
I think that Jesus sounds like a near-death experiencer to me. He
Hmm.
speaks my language. When I hear him, I hear the light,
Yeah, the things that
right?
come out of his mouth are very ancient wisdom, universal principles. They're all there, and it's not exclusive, and it's certainly not
Nope.
churchianity.
No.
I'm really proud of you. I'm very grateful that you got a chance to survive that. And I see you still out there suiting up and showing up all over the place. I wanted to touch base because I'm looking at our time and I can't believe it's going this fast. You mentioned something about mysticism. You said you don't have to have an education, you just have to be willing to go inside and be willing to hear or understand. So folks that are watching, you hear these experiences that Peter has had and other people have had, you can have them as well. And there you are just as human as everybody else. And you have this within you as well. How would you suggest to anybody who's out there who's like, well, I've never had an experience like that before. I want to, I can't. What do I do? How do I
So
get in
there's
touch?
basically a bunch of ways that it happens. You're born that way,
Hmm.
and it just comes to you naturally.
Yeah.
Uh, the divine just gives it to you. It
Yeah.
just one day, you're 25 years old or 50 years old or 70 years old, and this thing happens. You get
Hmm.
visited by the dead, or a non-localized angel comes in your presence, or something like that, and then you can meditate. Find a practice of a ritualizing practice of meditation, and I don't mean what I mean is learning to quiet your mind.
Yeah.
And so this is universal. The Taoists, the Zen
Hmm.
Buddhists, the Catholics, the Jews, everybody does this. The Sufis, everybody does this.
Hmm.
Everybody stops the story inside their head, and they do this with language or movement and breath. And
Hmm.
if you can find a way, and it's a lifelong practice, it's not a quick fix, it's not a shortcut, but the practice of a dedicated practice of meditation has a daily impact in your life. It brings peace. It brings peace to your daily living in a practical way, so that it helps balance anxiety. It helps makes you less reactive.
Mm-hmm.
But in the long run, it thins the veil. It stops. There'll be these moments in your meditation where, when you're in the flow, you enter into the quietude, into the silence. And when you're in the silence, if you don't look at it, you stay there. And if you look at it, you get kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, that
so
sounds about right.
it's this accumulation of quietude. And it's when the mind stops telling you who you are is when you begin to see who you actually are. And
Right.
so a practice, and then I'm going to toss out this thing that's going on in the United States, and also a little bit in England at the University of Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think it's at Birmingham. Now that I say that, I would double check that before I check that reference. But John Hopkins University, New York University, University of Arizona, they're doing experiments with psychedelics, and what they're finding, I don't know if you're following this at all, but in the United States, especially at John Hopkins and NYU, they're finding transcendental experiences of the end of duality and the joining of oneness, and they're doing this in clinical settings with controlled settings and lots of like a year of psychological tests, and they're finding out that people can have transcendental experiences, and they do
Oh,
have them that have after effects. And I want to emphasize that these are clinical settings,
mm-hmm.
and they are controlled, and they are with guides, and they are cultivated and curated experiences, but they are real. And I can't I have spent the last couple of years reading about them. I know one guy who was in the study, which is what brought it to my attention in the first place. So that's a possibility. That's a possibility that is ancient, and predates Christianity, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's an accessibility point for people in the future.
God,
But I
that's
wanted to say,
promising. Go ahead.
after being a minister,
Mm-hmm.
I got recruited into television, and I had a 2-minute TV spot, and
Yeah.
a weekend half-hour radio show, and some other stuff too. But basically, what I was doing is I was a cultural influencer for a couple of states in New England during the morning news, and so I told sacred stories that I wrote. But my real goal was to bring the light to people as directly as I could in the way that I looked at them, in the way that I spoke, in the language that I used. And so and after 15 years of that, now I'm doing Not Church. And so Not Church is specifically named because it is not religious. It's non-doctrinal and no BS.
Wow.
Um,
That's gorgeous. No dogma, no drama, just literally the pure essence and coming out there to love on people. There's compassion. I popped into a couple episodes and was able to see what you're doing. And it is so essential. And I love that you
thank
shared
you.
the projects that are going on about like people did with the ayahuasca, and there's other things that people have been doing. And they're talking about, okay, we're get to the veil, get to the veil. I'm like, I don't know about that. But now the more that I understand, there are, I mean, it's not cocaine, it's not heroin, it's not any of that.
Mm-mm.
This is something that actually does, and if it's controlled, this is a very real possibility to look at what we can do to go within. We need to go within. It's not inside of a building or a church or an organization. It's inside you. And you mentioned go within yourself, and that meditation to silence the thoughts, this endless chattering, just go to that space in between the thoughts. It doesn't have to be difficult. You don't have to pay for a thing, and it doesn't have to be a big spiritual orgasmic experience every time. It's just to quiet the mind, to get between the thoughts into that silent space, because you can access yourself there, which is beautiful. And there's so much that I wanted to be able to talk to you about. I wanted to touch on your counseling because I know that you have all of this experience and you do counsel. You mentioned mostly, is it folks that have had spiritual, mystical experiences? Is that
Mostly.
really? And what would
Mostly.
you, who are most of your clients? How would you describe your clients, please?
International. Clients are those who have maybe had a near-death experience and need help reflecting on it, or they've had other mystical experiences that they need to help reflect on. I do a lot of grief counseling
Mm.
because, especially with parents of children,
Oh God, yes.
so death is, and I help people. I'm not a therapist.
Right.
What I do is I help people. I have a lot of experience with mysticism,
Mhm.
and I can help people. I can help people find their way through their own mystical experience and give them some tools for themselves. so that they can go on to their next, whatever they're doing next, in their pursuit. It's a it's very helpful. I do a lot of mystical reflection. I've got some regular clients who, some of them are, I've got Mormons and Christians and Jews and everybody. It's not religious. Maybe I think there's even a Buddhist or two, and some other types of religions that are minor religious groups.
Well, we had Charlie Bannon on a little bit ago talking about
I know Charlie.
and psychotherapy. Yes, that's the way I met you. And he's talking about bringing in mysticism with, the mental health world. And if you're bringing this in, do you bring up the past lives as well? Do you bring up any?
I not so much, and I saw my past lives when I was dead, and what I saw more importantly was that I am not any of them.
Right,
I am not those things,
right.
and so I have, instead of dedicating myself toward any of the more material, physical manifestations of the divine, I've pursued the oneness of being, and so that's, I put my aim there.
Okay.
If people want to pursue their previous lives, that's great. That's
I was
great.
just thinking maybe it might flesh out why there were certain issues in this particular life.
But see,
Or
I am not
yeah,
this life.
yeah,
That's so from where I am. Okay,
yeah.
from where I am a created, being of light, made by, in the image of the divine, and I
Yeah.
am not Peter.
I see.
Peter,
Yes.
I may be working. I work in my karmic thing out here, but
Yeah,
that karmic thing isn't even me.
I
I
understand.
am not in
Yeah.
pursuit of that. I'm in pursuit of the of the oneness itself. And
Mhm.
I do talk about those things with people, but that's not my forte. There are other people who have that forte.
I understand. I was just wondering how to explain some of the bigger picture in case there's a karmic knot that seems to be absolutely inescapable and things
But
like
all these knots are all, they're not all, none of them are real. All of they're in the same way that the world itself is not material. I mean, it's material and it's manifested, but even those things aren't real either. So
Mm.
if you aim at, Jesus said, if you aim at heaven first above all things will be added to you.
Yeah,
And so
that's right.
if you make your eyes single, your body will be filled with light. And you can work on all these other aspects of yourself, which is
Mhm.
great. Um, but as for me, I choose to work on the consciousness itself. I'm in pursuit of that thing, of the light itself, because that's what I am. And
Yeah,
so the more I can get out of the way in the world here,
yeah.
the stronger my connection is, and the more space inside me there is for it, and the more it comes out of me that isn't me. And
Mm.
so my practice is getting out of the way, and that includes all of my karmic baloney.
Yeah.
You know.
Karmic baloney. I understand. When you have parents that have gone through what is our greatest fear is to lose a child, how do you offer comfort and insight for
Oh, it's
them? That
not
is,
easy.
I know. Can you give us just a little bit of what you might share? It might help someone who's watching right now because
I,
it's
I
such,
I do a lot of listening.
yeah.
I do a lot of listening to their pain, and
Mm,
I try to share pain with them. I
mhm,
try to accept some of their pain from them,
uh,
and I try to get them to talk about it. And if they've had an experience where this child has come to visit them, that makes it easier. But
yeah.
doesn't, grief is real.
It,
Doesn't Grief is a real thing. Um, it's hard, and I mostly just listen and assure them. I give people a lot of assurance. What they want from me often is heaven real? Is my child still alive? Is my kid waiting for me? And I've seen, I've been around a lot of death in my life, because as a pastor, that's what happens.
yeah.
And so I've seen plenty of people dying, getting visited by the deceased, getting ready to be taken home,
Mm,
lots of times. And so I can say with assurance that I have witnessed that, and the comfort that has given the dying.
mhm.
It's not when that's too weak a way to say it. The comfort it gives the dying. They're already one foot out of this world and one foot into the other world, and they like the other world better.
Mhm.
Especially when someone comes to greet them.
Mm, 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 mm. I just don't even know what to say. The work that you do, it's so valuable and so comforting. And to be able to, I mean, death is such a huge thing. You're able to walk up there and face it and see that it isn't the end, that there's far more to that, to us than that. Is even when I mention that to some people, they go, "Oh, that's it. Once I'm gone, I'm gone. That's it." But in this
They'll,
world, there's
they'll find out.
yeah, I know. Well, I always have that. I find, I was going to say this. Do you find that people find you callous? Because when people pass away, I don't wail and moan. And I'm like,
Uh,
they made it. They made it. This is great. And I also look forward to it. They go, well, wouldn't you? What if you're on a desert island? Would you? Da 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 da. I'm like, I don't think it would really bother me because I'm cool with going. You know, it's okay. And they're like, what? You wouldn't worry about anything to fight tooth and nail to stay here? And I'm like, no, I wouldn't. What would you say to those who say maybe, are you, because you're not going to be screaming and wailing and gnashing your teeth anymore about the things that maybe might have in the past made you do that because of the death of loss. Do they say that you're disengaged, or do they say that you're not feeling as deep? How would you say they describe that part about you?
when my sister died, I collapsed to the floor in grief.
Did she?
Un, un, like it just was what my body did. I think that bodies experience grief. Like it's it's a real, I can't even say that word.
Visceral, yeah, I know.
Thank
Yeah,
you very much. A
yeah.
visceral experience that's biological, and
Really?
I, generally speaking, I'm cool with death.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not the end. The thing about love is love is essentially selfish in life. You love somebody because of how they make you feel when you are with them, how you make me feel when I'm with you.
Hmm.
And so when someone dies, they it's grief is rooted in attachment to the other person, and it's real.
Mhm.
So yeah, people have. I'm a little distant. I'm a little not. I live a sort of a non-attached life, generally speaking. I mean, I like stuff, and I have people that I love,
Mhm.
and there are things that I have possessions that, when they break, I'm like, oh, God, I'm never gonna get another one of those. Whatever it is,
I know. Yeah.
um, whatever it is. So I'm like that too. But I think, well, I can say this, that when I was a pastor, people said I gave good funeral. So
Yeah.
I was good at funerals. I was good at death and dying,
Mm.
and I'm still good at death and dying. But my own sort of experience of it in my personal life,
Mhm.
it still hurts,
Yeah,
but um, maybe not as much as others.
I understand. I understand.
Because I helped my grandfather. I'm the one who told my grandfather it's time to go home, and I've told lots of people it's time to go home. It's okay to
Yeah,
let go.
yeah.
It's all right. They're gonna be okay. They
Mm.
don't, they love you, they want you, but you're gonna be fine. And they're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And so because I have this, well, it's compassionate. It's compassionate detachment. Maybe that's a way to put it.
It's a very good way to put it. That's true. Compassionate detachment. Compassionate detachment. Do you say that they'll see them again? Do you say you'll see them again?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I say things because the person needs to hear it.
Hmm. I
Well,
understand.
do I know that they'll see them again? I don't know that.
Mm.
I can guess maybe, but
Yeah.
I might say it because it brings them comfort.
Mhm.
But I do know that when you're in the presence of all divine love, you need nothing else.
Mm.
And so that if in the manifestation that they need is the beloved coming to visit them, then why wouldn't compassion itself give that to them?
Mhm.
And so I do say that to people, but I don't know that they will, because I can't know that.
Yeah.
But I can guess that they might.
Oh, so big, such a big thing. One word maybe for those who are grieving about something that isn't a death, when they come to you and they're feeling loss or fear and sadness. Anything you can say for those right now watching that might come across this channel, to a little bit of hope in this world, possibly grieving a loss of a job, loss of a situation, loss of a relationship, loss of health. Anything you would say?
It's, well, it's going to sound a little callous, but it ends. The
It,
greatest freedom I have here is knowing that it ends.
yeah.
Suffering ends, and that's what gives me hope.
Mm.
And also, it's, you know, as my mom would say, all things pass.
Yeah.
You know, they'll pass on, but in terms of, that doesn't help you with your grief today. If you have an emotional response that's wearing you down, and you keep telling yourself the story over and over again, I'm miserable, I'm miserable, I'm miserable, you can change your mind.
Mhm.
And that doesn't change your emotion, but it changes your experience of it. I'm
Mm.
beautiful, I'm beautiful, I'm beautiful. Life is will get better, life will get better, life will
Yeah,
get better.
it will.
It will, and ultimately it really, really will.
It's true. Look at that smile.
Really, really will.
It will. It will get so much better beyond anything we can describe and you can describe in what we can understand with our minds, what you have experienced, what other near-death experiences have experienced, what the ancient sacred texts talk about is far bigger than what we can understand. And it is love and compassion and understanding and unity and empathy and joy beyond belief. So, ladies and gentlemen, Peter Panagore, I need to tell you really quick, he is a counselor. There he is. He is a counselor as well. So, and counseling mysticism, folks that are going through mystical experiences, but not just solely that. He is a counselor. Remember the new book that is coming out, which will be out next year, 2022, Knowing God. And this is Varieties of Mystical Experiences. We got to hear a couple of them today. They were beautiful. And the other books, we have 2 Minutes for God, A Quick Fixes for the Spirit from Simon and Schuster. The first one about the near-death experience from 1980 is called Heaven. The book is not in 1980. The near-death experience was in 1980. Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning. He had another near-death experience in 2015. He is very, very, very busy doing all the things that he does. And remember, not church as well as, and there's also after that, there's a mystic salon, is there not? Yes.
There's a Mystic Tea Salon, and
There
that's
you go.
you can find the link at peterpanagore.love under programs, peterpanagore.love, and it's a private group, not recorded,
Yeah.
somewhere around 30 individuals every week,
Oh,
where we discuss each other's mystical experiences. It's a safe space to talk about mysticism. That's really what it is, and the wisdom of the group. So it's not, I'm the leader of the group, but I'm not the only wise person in the group. Everybody brings their wisdom with them, and so it's because we all belong to the light, and everybody only gets a part. Every bit of wisdom is only a portion of wisdom. You
yeah.
don't get the whole package. You only
Yeah.
get a bit of it. So altogether, you know, mystical visions are meant to be shared.
Yeah.
They are meant to be for the benefit of the greater community,
Mm.
and that's where I'm at with that.
Well, thank you for being brave and taking the time to go ahead and share them and doing this. That will encourage others to do the same. There are many, many people out there right now that have had them that have not said a word because they're petrified. But there is courage that is coming through this broadcast. There is love, there is compassion, and there is hope and comfort. And you are such a beautiful soul. Thank you for
Thank you,
today.
Anne. Peace
I
to you,
just
sister.
so grateful for you. And I look forward to our paths crossing again. If I can ever help in any way, I certainly will. I'm
Thank you.
really grateful for you. And I just want to give you some love back and thank you for your selfless service to humanity. The world is a much better place because you're in it. No, it's
Yeah.
true. It's true. And I look forward to anything and everything. I look forward to the book coming out and come back if you wish. We will always be here. I'll pop into Not Church if I can. And the Mystic
Super.
Tea Saloon.
Mystic Tea Salon.
Salon.
The salon.
The Mystic Tea Salon. There's so much going on. You're a busy man. How do you have time to even read a book if you're writing one? You're going to go back to writing this afternoon, are you not?
I'm going to be back to writing this afternoon, and I'm
Whew.
actually working on a movie. My book was
Yes.
sold. They got a movie coming out. I'm
Wait, which
working on
movie is
that.
it? Is that the for the
Heaven is Beautiful.
is that actually in production now? I didn't know that.
It's in active development.
Oh, that's exciting. Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? There's a movie coming out based on his near-death experience from 1980. And again, that is Heaven. I should let you say it. You're the one who wrote it. Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me Death is Just the Beginning. So we're excited to see that. When will that be out?
Well, I have a meeting with them this evening at 6 o'clock with my executive
Oh,
producers. I have a little more writing to do for them, but we're a year into the development project, and
wow.
so it'll probably be another 2 years before it actually is is out the door. But it's making a movie is a long process.
Yeah.
Making a book is a long process.
Yeah.
But it's going great, and I'm so fortunate to end up with these two producers. They are well-regarded, famous filmmakers. They've
Good.
done great things.
Who's
So
who's playing you?
I can't I can't
Are you gonna play
say.
yourself? Oh, come on.
No, I'm too old to play me. I'm way too
Right.
old to play me.
Not you in 1980 if you did little things.
No,
No
some hot
makeup,
young
no
guy
makeup.
is what they're talking about.
You know who's
I,
going to play you? Can you tell us who you?
I
If you know
cannot
them?
tell you, and it's not a guarantee yet, but they have a person in mind.
I see. Do you agree with that person? Do you look at that person and go, "Yeah, that's
I
okay"?
think that'd be awesome.
Really good.
Yeah, I'd be like,
I'm so excited. Oh,
really?
so exciting. It must be flattering to know who the casting agents and the directors thought should play you. Isn't that cool?
Well, it's the producers right now. We're not.
Is it?
It's just
Oh,
the two producers and me at this point. And it's we're still in the writing process. Next comes the script writer, the screenplay writer, the director, and the main actor, and that'll all happen in the next few months.
and when they do the script writing from the book, are they going to be consulting you at all times to know that it's accurate, or they write it and run it by you? How does
Well,
that?
it's a movie based on true life, so it's
Yeah,
based in the book, but it wasn't film ready. And one of
right.
the ways that it became film ready is that I worked for the last year under their tutelage, which is what this meeting is tonight, about writing a superstructure for it.
Oh,
Like, so I fictionalized I've taken everything in it is real, everything is
right,
true, but
right.
but as in fiction, I've compressed characters, and I've shifted some experiences between characters,
Really? To
and
flesh it out a little bit and make it more, yeah,
have to make it into a movie.
yeah.
There has to be a female
Love interest?
counterpoint, a love interest.
They're
There is.
different.
There-
So
there-
are you creating the love interest when there was no love interest, or are you embellishing the one?
mm, I took all my girlfriends and my wife, and I created one character.
Did you? Who gets to play her? Can you tell us?
Can't say a
Damn
word
it.
about any of that.
Well,
None of that stuff.
I'm so excited for you, and I just adore you. I wish you all the best. Thank you for your time. Ladies and
Thank you
gentlemen,
for
Peter
having me.
Panagore. Look for the links down below. Everything will be there. And we look forward to seeing you on the big screen, at the bookstore, well, online, on the bookstores, and everything that you are and do. You are a gem, an absolute
Thank
treasure.
you.
Thank you,
Well,
Peter.
peace and love. God bless
Oh,
everybody.
right back to you, sweetie. Thank you. Have a great night. Back to work, back to the writing, to the drawing table, and we will see you again, sweetie.
Soon.
Bye, Peter Panagore.
Peace.
Bye-bye. All the way to the end of the video. Here we are. It's just me and you. I'm wondering if you would please click like and subscribe. That would be great. Click the little purple picture down at the bottom there. It's a very special picture. There's a story to it, but click that, subscribe, click like, if you will. It does something to the algorithm so it can get this video out for more people to watch. And also click the bell notification icon so you can be notified next time Living Theosophy goes live. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.